18 years ago, our world took a dramatic turn, and today we remember the lives lost at 9/11. New York City commemorated the day with a solemn remembrance. Names were read, bells tolled, and victims' relatives assembled at Ground Zero. And all across the country, a moment of silence was observed. And almost 2 decades later, we are still at war with terrorism, as a U.S.-led coalition hit an ISIS stronghold in Iraq last night with 80,000 pounds of munitions. And this is a day that, as horrific as it was, Erica, brought Americans together. We did unify. We all remember what we were doing to the millisecond, to the moment, to the smell when we watched it on the news or were abruptly woken up. Do you remember exactly where you were when this happened?
Yeah, I was in my dorm, and we had there were 9 of us there, and one of my girlfriends, actually the woman that I was working for at the time, her father passed away. He had an office way up in the first tower, so he was missing for quite some time, and then he was confirmed dead. So yeah, I do remember that like it was yesterday.
And Jeff, what about you? Where were you?
I was at home with my mom, and my father was actually working in New York City at the time. You know, I think this happened uptown or down. He was the opposite, whatever it was. I don't know exactly New York City, but he was there. So the first thing I thought about was my father. Like, is he okay? And then he called home, and then we were watching, and then the second tower hit, and I was really nervous for my dad. But he's like, "Don't worry, it's way uptown. I'm way downtown, you know, working." But still, it was a scary moment.
It was downtown. He must have been uptown.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know the layout or the geography of it. But yeah, it was a very scary moment, and luckily he was okay. But you know, a lot of Americans weren't so fortunate.
And look how we all connected, right? Like you remember Cynthia Garrett? She was a friend of the show. She was in New York at the time. I was her nanny for her son, and I was watching him. And I remember dropping him off at school, coming back home, watching it happen, quickly driving right back to his school, picking him up, trying to get a hold of Cynthia because we didn't know where she was. We couldn't get a hold of her. It was very scary. We ended up getting hold of her much later in the day. But I remember him being in shambles. Like my mom. He was in 4th or 5th grade at the time. But Al, where were you?
First of all, it kind of marks like how old you are. Yeah. You know, because I was in graduate school, and I just remember I feel like I was the last person to figure out that it was 9/11. I was studying biology at the time. I went to the library, and the library was locked. And I'm like, is it Martin Luther King Day? I was like, you know, I'm just so focused on school, and this is pre like everything coming to your phone. I know it's hard for millennials to understand. Like, I didn't know, so I just went back to my apartment to study because I had a test the next day. And I remember I stopped at a Wendy's to get some food, and I remember the employees were crying. And and I was like, what is everybody's problem? I was like, what is going on? So like by the time I didn't figure out it was 9/11 until probably a couple hours later. But it just kind of shows you how quickly information travels now. And then you're making the crazy calls.
Well, back then there was no Twitter, there was no social media, so you were just going off based on people's reaction.
And I just moved from Miami to New York, so I mean from New York to Miami, so I had so many friends, so
that were affected.
A lot of panic phone calls.
Our thoughts and prayers with everybody that their lives were lost way too early, and to the first responders. I mean, we are forever in debt to you, especially those that are still dealing with the aftermath today. So please know